It's hard to believe it, but as I go to get in the shower right now, it's hard to believe that, when I was a kid, there was a time period in my life where I felt like I'd been watching wrestling for a long time. And that time period was when I was 9 years old. I was 9 years old and I thought, I've been watching wrestling a long time. But in reality, I had only started really watching wrestling when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And that's the crazy thing, is I had not been watching wrestling for a long time, but it felt like an eternity. I was 9 years old, and I still thought, man, remember when Shawn Michaels used to come out to Sensational Sherry singing his theme? And remember when, Andre the Giant was here and all that sort of thing? And here we are at WrestleMania 9, and I'm looking through one of my favorite books, and I forget the name of it, and I have it downstairs, and maybe you guys, if you're old enough, remember the book, but it was a book with like Hulk Hogan and all the wrestling superstars, and they had like their bios on the left and right sides of the page, and they all had a full page in the book, and it captured a lot of stuff on the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania and previous things like Macho Man and Elizabeth and stuff like that. And it was a big, thick, hardcover book. Remember, I have it downstairs, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but if you think of it, let me know in the comments. But if you don't, I'll find out anyway, and maybe pin it in the chat here in the comments somewhere. But I know that my shower is going in the background as I sit here. I'm probably going to make more content than I have in a long time with, being laid off of work, because when I get really panicked and crazy, I start getting really creative in the brain, and it kind of sets me off creatively. But it's hard to believe that at that 9 years of age, in 1993, that I had thought I had been watching wrestling for so many years. And I mean, by the time 1998 and the Attitude Era started, and, Stone Cold was in full blast, and I was 14 years old, then I really thought I'd been watching wrestling a long time. And now here we are in the year 2025, and I've been watching wrestling since 1988. And that's pretty crazy. And almost 35 years or whatever that is. And that's crazy. I've been watching wrestling 35 years. I've been paying attention to it for that long. And there's some people out there that are listening to this that are been watching since the 70s, maybe the early 70s. And, you've really seen the full spectrum of all the changes to, companies at their, chances are that if you watched wrestling in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, it's like you saw territories, and it's crazy because your experience watching a territory, whatever your territory was in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, is different than somebody else's experience who watched a different territory. And the thing that you have in common is that you both watched wrestling and you both watched a territory in its heyday. But the funny thing is, you may at the time have not really paid much of attention or known about the other person's territory. People almost become legends in a way, a legend. You may have heard about Ric Flair, or you may have heard about, different other wrestlers. I'm trying to think. I don't really have good examples on my head, but Killer Kowalski and Ronnie Garvin and all these different people that you might have heard of or read about, maybe, if you were that into it. But, let's be honest, there's a lot of people that weren't into it. Maybe the super nerds and people that really cared were really into it. You might have known somewhere in the Northeast, there's this guy that does this, and I've heard about it. But so many other people hadn't heard about it, especially a lot of the casual fans, a lot of the people who, they watched wrestling for 5 years and they enjoyed it, but then they kind of got out of it. Those people, they never knew that there was a different territory and a different superstar somewhere. It really isn't until, WCW or WWF and WCW and a couple other things, really got more national television time, NWA, that I wasn't around back then, and I didn't even know that, and I still don't know that much, to be honest. Jim Cornette's really the guy to talk to, and probably a couple other guys about it, but I guess my point in saying this is that, to see wrestling go through the transitions it's gone through from the 70s to being sort of a something that was very big on a more regional level, to something that was a worldwide spectacle, and it worked, to something that sort of cooled down quite a bit in the early 90s, to something that then exploded again in the late 90s, into the Attitude Era, and again being honestly, like, in the late 80s, the WWE became, mid 80s, WWE really became a household known thing. And it kind of went away, and then in the late 90s, it became again, cultural household thing. And it really rode that wave until about, I want to say about 2008 or 2010. And then, after that, WWE still has good faith, with everybody, because the generation that grew up with the Attitude Era, that generation is always going to remember wrestling now. There's no way they won't. It's the biggest generation ever, and that has that that brand recognition forever, for a long time, because parents go, I remember wrestling when I was a kid, and they tell their kids about it a little bit. And even if they don't watch it anymore, they all recognize what it is and understand it, whereas other generations didn't do that, didn't understand it that way. The mid-'80s did breed a lot of those same type of people, and it certainly did. And then it happened again in the late 90s. And then you could argue that it happened a little bit again with John Cena and The Rock, and how they crossed over to Hollywood, and everybody kind of knows who they are, so they're helping to kind of be brand ambassadors to wrestling. But coming up soon, I feel like, as I'm turning 40, a lot of the people who are 30 years old and up, it's going to sort of, it feels like it will start fading after that, because the Attitude Era kids are all in their 40s or older, and some a little bit younger. And, they're going to start turning 40, 50, 60 and having heart attacks and things. Hope not for me and you guys, but, I don't know, the way I eat, who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, it's very interesting how the wrestling has changed over the years. Anyway, I've got to go now, because I think the shower is done. I've been waiting for this water to fix itself as I'm testing the pipe. I'm being my own plumber. Thanks for listening to this ramble. I'm not sure what it was supposed to be or mean, other than a self-reflective, self-indulgent nostalgia trip of babble. But one thing's for sure, I can say this with for sure certainty, and that is wrestling.